Our next guest is Hayden Brown, the chief executive of Upwork, which is a popular platform that connects businesses with freelancers. And my colleague Steve Clemons, contributing editor here at The Hill, speaking with her a short while ago.
Hayden, thank you so much for joining us. I guess the thing that's burning in my mind about the future of work, the future of the workplace, the social contract between workers and their employers is, what if COVID hadn't happened and we hadn't all been driven online into digital space? What would our world look like right now? And where would your company be at this point?
Steve, thanks for having me. I think if we look at where the world was in 2019 and early 2020, a lot of these trends around remote work and around hybrid teams with freelancers on them, they were certainly growing. And there was an appetite for this. Workers were voting with their feet and joining the freelance economy in increasing numbers every year. Companies were struggling more and more with where to go to get the skilled talent they needed, and were turning to new platforms like Upwork and others to find that talent. But certainly what we saw with COVID and this mass experiment with remote work that happened across the US and globally really was a tipping point that unleashed, I think, for people, a massive work awakening around, on the talent side, so many workers realizing that work as they knew it was not working for them. And their whole value system around what they were getting from work, the boundaries around their work, really, they realized as they experimented with working at home and broke the old habits of commuting and, built their home offices and all these other things, it really was an experience that I think turned the light bulb on for so many workers around a different value proposition for work, a different risk profile in terms of what they realized they were willing to give and take in order to get different things from their work. And for companies, so many of them figured out that the things that they thought were holding them back from remote work at scale, from having independent talent inside of their workforce at ever larger numbers, it really started to change their thinking in very dramatic ways. And so I'd say what we saw with that was a huge acceleration, obviously, in the remote work trend, which is here to stay. And I think we're just seeing the beginning of what that's going to mean for us. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we will see massive innovations in how work is happening on the backbone of remote work being kind of underneath that. And for the independent talent economy, this is really just beginning to open up, I think, what will be a much bigger set of advancements for companies adopting independent talent in much bigger ways, because this is already a big part of the economy. $1.3 trillion in the US alone of our economy is from independent freelance talent today, and it's growing every year. So it's already become much more mainstream, I think, than people realize. But companies are still trying to figure out, how do they fully tap into this workforce, because they are struggling with skills gaps, lack of agility, needing much more different and varied ways of finding these workers. Right. And even with the COVID experiment around remote work, that opened their eyes to what was possible, but it didn't necessarily equip them fully to how to do that. And they're starting to figure that out, I think, in greater numbers. But again, there's a lot more ahead of us that is going to be fascinating in that regard.
Well, look, I'm fascinated by Upwork and the independent talent economy, as you called it, freelancers and others that are out there and have been fighting. And as you said, this was a trend well before COVID hit, but COVID was like a light switch. And, everybody, we do our reaching out to our family, we do our work, everything in the digital space. And so it's really opened up that opportunity. I guess the question is, as you kind of look forward, what kind of counseling do employers get? Because I still hear employers saying, we have to have everyone back. And I'm sitting here, basically in the quiet saying, you're going to lose half your workforce who have other job options in this economy. They like living in Alabama. They don't want to come back to Washington, D.C. I'm just interested in how that's going to unfold. And do you spend a lot of time trying to help employers wise up to the facts?
Yeah, Steve, we absolutely do. I mean, our customers are pioneering in the space, whether it's the independent talent side of our platform who are innovating their careers in incredible ways, or the businesses, which range from 30% of the Fortune 100 to mom and pop shops using Upwork to innovate and work in different ways. We absolutely see this, and we live and breathe it ourselves. We've been a remote work company for 20 years since our founding. And so we really see the opportunities. We understand the pitfalls, and we have lived through that ourselves and with our customers, but we see the opportunities. And I think for those businesses that you're hearing from who are demanding workers come back into the office and are kind of putting on the blinders and saying, this remote work thing, that was in the past and no more. I think you're right that they are really going to struggle to be competitive in a talent market that, as we look at things like the Great Resignation and what is going on around us, talent really want different things. We see already that nearly half of Generation Z coming out of college and establishing their careers are freelancing out of the gate. They want flexibility. They want freedom. They see a career path that looks very different from what their parents and grandparents did for a number of reasons. That includes the values that they have around independence, autonomy, this idea of themselves as entrepreneurs. It also is important to them because they see what happened in previous recessions for their parents, going through 2008 and other things. And they look at that and say, this whole idea of being reliant on a single employer for my whole world and my whole career, and if I get laid off and I'm out in the cold, that doesn't look so great. So my value and my risk calculus looks a lot better if I'm standing on my own 2 feet with a stable of clients who I'm serving. And if one of them goes away, I'm still safe because I've got my other clients in my business that I'm working with. So again, the economy has changed. These workers want different things. And it only takes for any business, one or two of their competitors really pioneering a different way of working with talent for it suddenly to become very hard for them to compete. And we saw what happened, for example, in the financial services industry already with companies like Stripe putting up ads and saying, you know what, you don't want to go back into the office with Goldman Sachs or whoever else, come work for us. So I think we're going to see with this war for talent that it's going to be very competitive, and there's going to be difficulties for companies that really are trying to attract the best talent if they're not willing to be flexible in terms of what that talent can do and where they can work.
Right. And I'm sure you've answered this question a million times, but I think a lot of us, we're very familiar with the kind of old social contract between workers and companies, because that's where you got your 401k. It's where you got dental benefits. It's where you got, various other forms of educational benefits, and you built your savings and health. And so there was a kind of monopoly where the employer had the edge over the employee, and that's often also how unions came about and were empowered within those work environments to protect the interests of employees, because the employment side of it had so much power over all this other pack. Where does all that go in the future heavily freelanced individual talented economy? How do you organize for workers' interests in that arena?
Yeah, and Steve, I think this is where it's very clear that the rules that were written, 70 plus years ago around the social contract, around labor organizations, all those things, they worked for an era of work that has changed radically. And frankly, those things don't work in this new era of work. And the solutions are certainly not to go back and try to force people into full-time work that doesn't work for them, but works for that old model. And the other thing that we see is, for freelancers, for example, working in today's economy, the last thing they want is to go back to a full-time job or stay in a job they hate just to retain medical benefits that they need. So we have to work in today's environment with policymakers to figure out how to evolve the system in the US in particular to really cater to the needs of today's workers who want flexibility, who want autonomy. 44% of the independent talent that we've surveyed are actually earning more as independent talent than they were in a full-time job. More than half of the talent we talk to say there's no amount of money that they could be paid to go back into a full-time job. So this way of working has benefits for the people doing it that are clear and are profound. I talk to talent all the time who have these amazing stories, whether it's spouses of military personnel. They take these jobs with them. They're crafting these lives that just wouldn't work in a traditional full-time employment ecosystem. So we have to evolve, the benefits frameworks and other things in this country to work with a much more flexible way of working, which this freelance economy affords, rather than trying to go back and kind of force fit things into these more archaic models that, we're for another time that we've clearly moved past as a society.
Hayden, I'm also interested in whether there needs to be an evolution in credentialing. A while back, I interviewed the CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, and he said one of the things that was really important to him, this was a few years ago, was finding a way so that those in middle skill jobs, construction jobs, other sorts of things could tell their stories, because they too were out there marketing, and they're also part of that freelance economy. They didn't fit too well in the old LinkedIn, so they added videos and whatnot. But I've been watching and trying to sort of look at how the education system and training system gets disrupted to allow people with these special skills that are developed to begin stacking credentials in a way that are recognized in your industry. Just tell me how Upwork looks at that, whether you're part of the answer there, and what do you think else we need to do in terms of disrupting the training and education credentialing process, which really leaves out a lot of people?
Totally. I think this is where platforms like ours can be a critical part of the solution as we look at credentialing, as we look at the evolution of higher education and the huge problem we have in this country around student loan debt, and the questions that people are asking themselves around, is this degree worth it? And will it pay off for me? So the vantage point that we have on this problem is we run a closed loop system that's essentially a labor marketplace where we can see the inputs and the outputs in an extremely measurable way. So for talent operating on our platform, whether you are in Wheeling, West Virginia, whether you're in Bangor, Maine, you can come on our platform and we can start to measure and tell you, when you add this credential or this degree or showcase this additional portfolio item in our system, this is how much more you can earn. This is how much these skills are actually worth, because we can see the full loop of other talent like you who've added that credential or who have that degree, how much more they earned once they started adding that information onto their profile, how it changed outcomes for them in an extremely exacting way. And so we can tell people up front how much more they can earn, whether it's worth adding that degree or that credential, and create an extremely powerful mechanism to know whether those things are powerful and valuable or whether it's a total waste of time. So our view is to start to develop much more of that visibility for talent up front, so they know where to invest in getting an extra skill, getting an extra credential, learning and upskilling, because at the end of the day, people want to earn money to feed their families, to pursue their pursuits, all of the rest of it. And that's where we feel we can really be valuable to them in giving them that forward visibility way before they've invested the time and energy and money in that next degree or that credential.
Well, listen, Hayden Brown, I always love our discussions. I love looking at your company and all the various things you're doing. You're providing an invaluable service for so many. So Hayden Brown, President and CEO of Upwork, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us how this is going.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Steve Clemons, thank you. And of course, to Hayden Brown, the CEO of Upwork.